Good afternoon, students. Okay, today, inshallah, our workshop will be about speed reading for early childhood educators. I am Dr. Ghada Al-Mursidi from the Education College. So I can present our workshop in both languages, Arabic and English. So we can, chit chat using both languages. Okay. So why I choose speed reading, and especially for early childhood educators, because we are as educators, and most of our undergraduates are from early childhood education. We have also physical education and special ed. So I think speed reading is important for us, especially for students, for teachers, for faculty members, especially when we do task or research. So today what I will discuss, I will have some intro about history, terms regarding the speed reading. I'll discuss some issues related to the causes and effects of slow reading when we have slow reading, how that could affect on our processes, comprehensions and all that, and why we need to do speed reading, and also some methods and concepts about speed reading, and also how can you improve your speed reading, and also sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't need it, especially if you are doing for studying for test exams. You have complicated terms, unknown terms, so maybe in that process you don't need the speed reading. Okay, I will mention some of the criticism through the years about the speed readings and also the references. So I can give you an example. Let's say this guy, his name is Jeremy. Okay, he's trying to find some information, and he's overloaded with information. Let's say his manager asked him to present a report next morning, and he has a stack of information. So what can he do? Okay, he doesn't have any time. So the option for him is the speed readings. So as we all know, speed readings can help you to absorb the information quickly and effectively. So you read fast and you take the information that you need. And we know speed reading has advantages, pros, and also the disadvantages. As I said, I will mention some of the criticism about the speed reading. And we'll think about, okay, when we need it, when it is appropriate to use it, and what are the effects of using the speed reading, because sometimes you need to understand, sometimes you need to memorize and have long memory of what you are studying, for example. So when can you use the speed reading? If we go to the history of the idea of the speed reading, this teacher, her name Evelyn Mislin Wood, she was the pioneer and the guru for the speed readings. She was known of the speed reading. What she said, she claimed that she can read 2,700 words per minute, okay, by sweeping her finger along the lines as she reads. So she used her finger to sweep while she is reading. So she's a researcher, so that means she read for her research. She's a school teacher, so she's teaching. That means she has to read a lot. Okay, so and she was committing to understanding why some people were naturally faster at reading and tried to force herself to read very quickly. So she was trying to research about about the people. Do do they read faster? Do they do speed reading? Is it natural, or do they have to practice it to get that talent? And she tried herself different strategies about speed reading. So for example, in 58, what she did, she tried, for example, having a book and brushing the pages and seeing if she can do the speed reading. So what she noticed that, by sweeping motion of her hands across pages, she can, her eyes focus and pay attention to the words in general. And that helped her to read smoothly across all the pages. So she used her hand as a pacer, okay? So she doing the reading by her finger, okay? And try to read faster. So that her method as a start. So there are some terms we can try to understand. For example, speed reading, what does it mean? It is a process. What you do, you try to recognize, absorb some phrases, sometimes some sentences, okay, on a page, okay, all at once. And you try to do that rapidly, okay, quickly. Rather than, you don't identify or recognize, okay, individual words. So speed readings, you try to read in general. You don't focus on words, and you try to understand them. So you try to understand the general idea of what you read. So there is different techniques for that. And also it depends on the ability to read quickly and faster. So for example, when you read as chunks. What do you mean by chunks? Some sentences work together, okay? And you try to minimize, you reduce the subfocalization. Subfocalization is, the word focalize is when you try to, you read aloud and you read in your mind. So that process will minimize your ability to read faster. So you try by your eyes, okay, moving your eyes to read, and you don't read it in your mind. And there is some criticism about this issue, because some of the researchers mention that it doesn't work because you need your inner voice for that. So the term chunking, we'll give you example. For example, you are at your home, your family decide to go for a trip, and you are alone in your home, and you have to set up your your security code for your home, and your dad give you the security code, but that you wrote it in a paper, and then you lost that paper. So what can you do? Did you remember the number, or what you do? For example, if you have this number, what you do usually, you chunk it. That means you make in groups the numbers, so you can remember it, okay? And some of us are good at this. I know a person who's doing this. If I give him a number, for example, he will memorize it fastly, because what he do, he's doing chunks of those numbers. He divide the numbers so he can remember the numbers, okay, in his mind. So that's the idea of chunking. It is a process when you do you have information, you make those information, you separate them in pieces, you bound them in a meaningful way, you can remember them in a meaningful way. So it depends how you do it, okay? So what do you mean by subfocalization? It's also, we call it as auditory reassurance. Usually it's a common habit for readers. It means, for example, you say the word in your head while you read. For example, you read, even if you read silently, but you read it actually in your head. So the voice in your head, it's louder. And some of the guru for speed readers say that it is not good to do that. because it slows your process of reading. So that's what we mean by sub-vocalization. So this is the process, for example, if you want to check if you are good with your reading or you are fast or not. So what you do, for example, how you calculate it. So let's say you have a passage of 1,000 words, okay? And assume that you will read it in 2 minutes only and 20 seconds. So what you do, the seconds will be 140. Then you divide the number of the words, the 1,000 by 140, so you will have 7.14. And then you multiply by 60, and it will give you that number, the 428.57. And then that's mean you can read 429 words per minute. You can make the same calculation with any process, with any, like, passages, number of words, and even the minutes. You can try it and you can check, like, if you are average or slow reader, or, you are speed reader. So for example, if you checked, so if you read less than 120 words per minute, that means you are slow. If you are reading from 501 to 1000 words per minute, that means you are good. In between, you will be what? In an average. If you are in college, for example, now you are in education college, for example, if you read from 241 to 350 words per minute, that will be like, like college level. So always we ask students to read and practice. The more you practice, the more you can, speed your process of reading. So if we think about the causes of slow reading, why sometimes we suffer from slow reading? Because what we do usually, sometimes when we read word by word. For example, we are native speakers of Arabic. It is our first language. If we try to speak and read in English, it is our second language. So that means there are many technical words. Maybe we don't know what does it mean. So what we do, we read, word by word. Sometimes we go and translate these words. So that's what slow our reading. Also, our perceptions, like, our recognition. We try to read, but we still, like, we don't understand those words. So what we do, we try to read it again and again and again to understand. So that's also a cause of our slow reading. Focalization, some people like to read aloud. When you read aloud, that's mean, it's like a habit. Sometimes it can slow your reading. Also, your eye movement, let's say you have a page on the front of you, and when you start reading, the way you move your eyes while reading, it is slow and it's not right, so that, slower than, your reading process. Regression, that's mean what you do. For example, you start reading and then, you think, I didn't understand. Or maybe you missed that sentence. So you go back and reread again. So that's what we call it, what? Regression. And it is also slow your reading. Sometimes some people like, to concentrate and pay attention. So what they do, they read word by word and try to understand. If they didn't understand, we'll go back and read again. And so that's all, like, cause slowing your reading. Also, if you don't practice, usually if you don't read in daily basis, that's mean, your reading will be like, slower. Think about, when we have kids at home, let's say 6 or 7 years, okay, or 8 years, and they just starting, to learn the alphabets, okay, Arabic or English, okay. So you can check how they read, okay. For example, the word right. So they will like, ra, so because, they just start reading, they just start learning. But after a while, if they practice reading, they will be like, their level will be better. So it is important to practice, always practice, practice, practice. Sometimes some of us, like, while we are reading, we think, oh, we didn't understand, we didn't comprehend that part. So we'll go back and read. So our fear of losing comprehension. Also, sometimes some of us like to slow read. It is like our habits. So it depends on what you want and what are your habits. Sometimes we read and we don't know what is important and what is not important. And we can, like, as an example, like some of the students, most of the time ask the teachers, okay, what are important, sentences or paragraphs, okay, in the slides or maybe in a book. Yeah. So that's mean it's good, because that's mean, you asking what is important. So when you read it, that part is important, you will focus more, and the other parts are not important, you might, speed reading it, okay. So that's good. It's a good process to ask your teacher, especially for testing and assessment. Sometimes, when you read, you think that, you have to memorize and remember everything, every word you read. But no, you don't need this. I mean, especially when you read for research, not for study. I don't mean for your study, like, when you do study for exam or test, it's different, okay? I mean, for your general reading. For example, you are reading for research, for example. You are doing research and you read. So in that case, you don't need to remember everything. You select what information you read to remember. For example, let's say you are preparing for a presentation. So even what you do, you choose from a book or pages what information you need, and that information you try to understand and memorize and all that process. So if we think why we want speed reading, as we know, for example, if you work, if you study, okay, you are doing research, whatever, okay, we need, because life now is what is speeding. Everything is changing. So, for example, let's say if you are in the field of medicine or in the field of science, or let's say in the field of special ed, for example, or physical education, or even in early childhood, you need to read and update yourself of the new information in your field. So if you do slow reading, you can't, yeah? So you have to learn how you rapid your speaking and also reading. So it will save your time. For example, let's say you start your day with reading newspaper or magazine, okay? And then you start, your day with your work or your study or whatever, okay? So for magazine or newspaper, you need to, read it fast, yeah? And also for the efficiency. For example, you are an employee in a business, okay? So you want to learn about your field, so you have to update yourself on daily basis. Also, why we speed reading? Because we need to broaden our horizon. That's mean We want to learn lots of information, variety of information in a limited time. When you read, usually your speaking will improve. For example, if you're preparing for a public speech or conversation, so that's mean you have to read a lot so you can speak, yeah? As I mentioned before, you want to know the development or improvement in a field, so that's mean you have to read on daily basis. Also, it's good for your brain because, if you don't read, that will affect on your mental health because, you need to exercise and get more knowledge. Also for you as students, okay, you have exams, you have tests, okay, so you have to study in daily basis for those, so that means you have to speed read. Okay, so how can you do it? Okay, so now we mentioned the history, what does it mean? Now we want to learn how can we do the process of speed reading. So what you do, for example, okay, when you read, don't pronounce, okay, each word in your head. So you make sure that you hear it in your head. You don't need to read it aloud. And that's what we call it the sub-focalization. You stop doing this. Even some researchers, criticize that idea. What you do, try to skim. So what do you mean by skimming? Skimming is like, you try to get the general idea. Maybe you read group words. Okay, you get just the information, the title, first sentence, last sentence. So you focus on blocks of words rather than individual words. So blocks of words, that's mean different words together, okay? When you read, you try to relax. When you have the page, okay, your eyes try to sit in a way that you can see the whole page easily. And try to practice how can you move your eyes and skip faster across the word. There are different concepts when we discuss the speed readings. So for example, the scanning. So what do you mean by scanning? It's different than skimming. So scanning is, for example, when you study for a quiz, usually you try to find specific information. Or let's say you have an IELTS exam or TOEFL exam, or maybe you have MSAT. So what you do, usually when you have a test, for example, a comprehension text, you have some questions. So what you do, you'll just go and try to find those information to answer them. So that's what we call it, what, scanning. Before scanning, you have to do what? The skimming. You get the general information. Sometimes you can do mind mapping. You draw a mind mapping that will, help you to remember the information that you need. So you can see here an example of mind map. It's like diagram. You try to organize some of the informations and you visualize them, you see those information. Sometimes can be hierarchical, as you can see. You make relationships between those words. We have another concept, we call it meta guiding. It is about what? Your eyes. With your finger, for example, or sometimes if you are using pointer, you move your finger or your pointer and you try to read the passage quickly. That's what we call it meta guiding. There are different methods you can use for speed reading. For example, using the pointer. We call it the pointer method. Or we call it the hand pacing, or as I mentioned before, the meta guiding. By your hand or your finger or your pointer. So if we go to the teacher, Evelyn Wood, what she said, as remember, she mentioned that she can read 2,700 words per minute if she swept her finger along the lines as she read. So this is a method. Another method, maybe you can bring a card and you start reading and moving your card. So that's, you don't go back to what you had read previously. You don't do the regression process. The tracker or the pacer method, it is similar to the pointer method. So for example, you have your pen and you try, you read and you move your pen. If there is something important, you might, underline. So you can maybe later on come back to that word, especially for example if you want to translate a word or there is a word you don't understand, so you just underline and later on you can go back. But even that word, sometimes if you translate it, it is easy to understand the whole passage, so it is okay. So when you do the tracker or pacer method with your pen, try don't spend 1 second in each line, for example. Okay, and move into the other pages. At the beginning you might find it difficult to do this, but firstly maybe you will get some information, will learn little information, and then through the whole process, and when you use the technique time by time, you'll try to comprehend and understand. And this process is important and useful because you will not go back to the previous, because you know where you stop, reading, and you know where exactly you read. Because sometimes, for example, without using a pen, for example, or focusing with your eyes, okay, or a pointer, maybe you are reading and then someone distract you and you don't know where you stop, so you have to go back again and read. So it is important, especially with the speed reading, to focus and read and avoid any kind of distraction. That means, choose a room that is comfortable for you and read. And that's why, for example, when we have the libraries, okay, the spaces, usually, the staff in the library will tell you please, read, for example, silently because there are others wants to read. So quiet room is good for speed reading. Other methods for speed reading, for example, the scanning or the proving method. You scan. So that's mean what you do. You move your eyes quickly down the page or sometimes in the center. What you do, you focus on the key sentences, important sentences, sometimes names, numbers, words, just important information to get the information that you need. So you will not read every word on that page, for example. And if you do mind map, will be good because it will organize your information in a way that, assist you to go back to the information that you need. And mind map is good even for your study. For example, if you study sometimes from slides or from your book, okay, make mind map easy. Like, write the information that you want to remember. Will be easier for you to visualize, to see it, and remember it even in your, test or exam. As I said, always avoid any kind of distraction. Sit in a room or environment with no voices, with no people or kids coming, going inside and outside the room, and focus on the page or the book you are reading. Put it in front of you. If you have, let's say, a table or in any place that you like to sit and read. Go easy. That's mean, for example, let's say when you start reading, especially if you want to practice, try to, let's say, read a simple novel or a simple article and practice those techniques. When you feel you are comfortable with those techniques, go to more complicated, like, articles, especially if you are doing research, for example. And after you read, try to check, because now you are practicing. Check, like, what information did you understand and how much faster you can do. Even you can practice those activities with your, like, colleagues, classmates, your friends, or maybe your sisters, brothers at home, and check. For example, read a passage and then let the other person ask you some questions and check if you answered right or not. So you can check if you understand while you are reading that passage. So how can you improve your reading? For example, as we said, like, sometimes by your finger or a card, okay, just cover the word that you already read, so you don't go back to read them again. And most importantly is know what you want from the text. So based on the type of the text, for example, if you have a research paper, okay, and let's say you will do a literature review. So usually you have to understand how that research paper is written. For example, what you do, you will go to, for the title, you will go to what are the sections of the research paper. Usually what we have literature review, we have data analysis, data results, for example, we have, discussion, we have conclusion, we have references. So search on, so when you, for example, for a research paper, when you know all those sections, okay, so for example, you want to write a literature review, so maybe from that paper you want the results. So you'll go immediately to the results and you read it quickly and you will take what information you need. So that means you don't have to read carefully and word by word, like, if the research paper is 10 pages, you don't need to read the 10 pages. You read and you search for just the information you want. For example, you are searching about, let's say, some kind of statistics related to the virtual learning, let's say in the UAE, in a university, for example. So you just like, even what is good now, we have the technology, like, PDF file and other kind of files, yeah. So you just, for example, write the word and it will search for you. So maybe you search for that word, for example, virtual learning. You want to know what does it mean, for example. So you will go, you read the passage around, or the paragraph around that word. And you will try to, for example, if you want to use it for your research, you paraphrase that, for example, passage. So that's how you do it. But it needs practice. You have to practice that many times. So what you do first, you can do skimming, then you can do what? The scanning. For practicing the speed reading, you can do benchmarking progress. So for example, you decided you want to learn and practice how you do speed reading. So you start, let's say, month of Ramadan. Let's say you decide to read a whole book. You decide, let's say, each day you read like 10 pages, for example, or 5 pages. It depends how you, like, what you want and how you decide and how you practice it. So let's say first day you check and you calculate how fast with timer. If you have a timer, check this page with timer, how many seconds or minutes you read it. And the next day, try it again, and through, let's say, a whole month, and check. Did you, like, your reading was faster or not? And you practice. So you try to compare your progress from the first day to the second, to the third, to the fourth. And most importantly, as I mentioned, you have to practice, practice, practice. You have to do it. If you didn't do it, you will never know what your speed in your reading. Because, when you practice, it will come naturally to you. So to recap, the most information I gave you today, there are different techniques and methods you can use to speed your reading. You can do skimming. Try to avoid the sub-focalization, the reading aloud or reading in your mind. You have to practice always. Try to avoid any kind of distraction. And always try to balance between your speed and your comprehension, because you want to understand what you read. It is important. So when we think, okay, when we can do speed reading, because we cannot use it in all cases. For example, if we are studying for a test or exam, you need to focus on some information. So that means you will not do like a speed reading. And also you have to think, okay, how can I balance between my pace and also my understanding? And also, if I want to read, do I want to memorize? For example, if I am presenting or I'm doing a public speech, so that means I have to memorize some information so I can, like, say it to other people, yeah? Especially if they're like technical information in your field. But for example, if you want just to read a book or a passage or paragraph or pages or article, and you want just to learn about what is the conclusion or the arguments, the basics, so that's, you can do speed reading because you are not looking for technical words. As I mentioned, some researchers criticized the speed reading. They didn't like it, okay? Because what they are saying, like, because, for example, if you study for a test, you need to understand each word. That's what they are saying. And also, some researchers mentioned that, okay, if we think about our anatomy or our neurological levels, okay, neurology, about the brain, about how our, like, eyes, minds work, they are saying is usually, we don't speed read fast as, as they mentioned. Like, for example, let's say you have a phone book and you are flipping the pages quickly. So it depends. Those are like their criticism. And they are saying also, when I mentioned the subfocalization, what we call the inner voice, our inside, our mental inside, if we are, reading silently, they said, we cannot avoid it. We cannot stop the inner voice. Usually when you read, like, inside you is like reading with you. So we cannot stop that. That's what, like, what they are saying, one of the criticism. And some researchers believe that, when you do the subfocalization, it's important so you can read well, to make sure that you are actually reading. So what we can do to read well, there are some steps. As I mentioned, do skimming. So that means you read in general. And that will help you to know if, for example, if you're reading different articles and you are searching different articles for your topic. So when you do skimming, you can choose which article better for your study, because, from the title, you think maybe the article is good for you, but, when you go through the article, you feel like, it is not related to the topic that you are researching. Always try to improve your fluency. Part of it, the fluency in recognition of words. That means the more you read words, the more you, in general, you learn about words and you translate words, for example, will be easier for you. And try to check, compare your reading in Arabic and compare your reading in English, okay? Because you are native speaker of Arabic, So you can notice you can read faster than the English. And why? Because you know the words. And you know Adam alayhi salam, when he start, okay, our God, Allah, start teaching him what? The words. And even if you check our kids, when they start to learn, they start with the words, for example, Baba, Mama, and they continue. So always try to learn the words, okay? The more you learn words, the more you know, the more you read, you know, and your reading will be faster. Number 3, know what you want before you read it. Okay. Don't waste your time, okay? For example, let's say you want to prepare for a presentation. So think about it, okay, what kind of articles or information I want to include in my presentation. So I will just read that information. I don't need to read all the information in that, for example, article. Okay, let's say I want to prepare for a speech, like for example, how to succeed in life, for example. Okay, so you will go and search for information that related to you. Because for example, in each, even for that topic, like for example, how to succeed in life, okay. For example, you will not read like, you know, articles related to, you know, for example, we are as Muslims, we are believing in God, okay. So our like arguments will be related to that. But you know, there are some researchers or writers, they are writing about how to succeed in life, but their ideas are different totally, you know. They talk maybe about, you know, let's say other stuff, okay? They don't relate it to our God and how we believe versus our gods and all that, and it is part of us, like, you know, our religion is teach us how to succeed in life. So we will not go and read those about, like, you know, those articles, because they are not related to our beliefs and all that. So that's part of it, like, you know, you have to know what you want to read before you read it, so you don't waste your time on reading it, okay? Like for example, I remember when I was in my PhD, we have some courses related to because I was in, like, you know, applied linguistics and all that. So we had a course related to critical thinking. So we have to choose a book and we have to criticize that book and write a critical review. So from the book was, the idea is similar to, like, you know, how to succeed in life and all that. When I start reading the book, I notice the reader, sometimes it's important to know the author, who's writing, or the writer who's writing this book, for example. Sometimes what his religion, what his belief, because you can get, like, you know, because, you know, when you read his books or her book, you will get all the philosophical, the beliefs of the aspects of that, you know, that author. So when I start reading, I notice it's like, you know, a religious book. It's about, you know, Christianity and all that, okay? Or for example, about Hindu, or, and they connect with like, you know, success in life. So you have to, you know, do that before, you know, before you read the book, for example. Number 4 is the deeper processing task to improve retention. So sometimes when you start reading, you want just the full comprehension, like, you know, general comprehension. You read a textbook just to get some ideas. But sometimes you want to read and you want to memorize So you need to comprehend and understand, because you want those information to stuck in your long-term memory. So that means you have to maybe sometimes read and focus on it. Especially like, when you will do like a quiz, okay, or test. Okay, so we are done with the presentation. So we have like 15 minutes for your, if you have any questions, we can do like, discussions and all that. Yes, students, are you here? So we are done with the presentation. If you have any questions, anything you want to discuss, we can do that for like, 10 minutes before we end our session. So let's say some examples of speed reading. So for you, for example, if you are in the field of early childhood education, okay, and also you want to teach the kids how they can do speed reading. So you start with the kids to teach them, for example, like, the alphabet, if it's like in Arabic and English. Then usually even in schools and KGs, what they do, they give the kid a storybook, and then with the storybook they ask the kid to read it many times. They can take it to home, and later on when they come, they can do like kind of competition. With that competition, okay, they can what, read faster, because they know the story. So to succeed in the speed reading, always knowledge and information. Because for example, okay, if you are reading in your field, will be easier for you to understand and skim and scan the paragraphs. But for example, let's say you are in the early childhood field, but you are reading in health or in medicine or in science. Sometimes it will be difficult to read and do speed reading, because you will need more time just to translate some of the words and to understand the technical words and their meanings. So it is important. Also, for example, to practice speed reading, what you can do, you can start reading novels or stories that you like. And I know like most of you, for example, read like even if Arabic or English, for example, or maybe a third language that you are learning. So you can start with reading novels, stories. I know like some of you like, they like, criminal stories, detectives, like, like detective stories, okay? Like, for example, Agatha Christie, okay? And you start like, reading. That will speed your process of reading. So just like, read whatever you do. Even with social media now, you have like, Instagram, Twitter, different kind of social media. Sometimes, they send you electronic books. So start to learn whatever you do. Even now with speed reading, you have also the technology. is good, okay? It helps you even with learning. For example, the electronic books. Okay, for example, if you have the book in front of you and it is electronic and you have the voice, so in the same time you can see from your eyes and read, okay, with the one who's reading. It's good. So that's, will help you in reading, learning the words, and also, getting information and comprehension. And also you can notice that, for example, Taraweeh prayer, you are focusing and in the same time, you are learning. So it is important. And if we think about, your field in early childhood education, think about the process that we do with the kids. We have the word wall. So that's mean, we put the words that we want them to memorize for their long-term memory. So when they see the words again, they will read it faster. We can do the same process with us as adults, especially with technical words, okay? We can have those words in a wall, in our computer, in our phone. There are different applications to use for that. And when we learn more words, that means our reading will be faster. Also, if you want to assess your speed reading, there's different program. You just Google it, right in Google, okay? Speed reading, free website programs. You can check and you can practice and try, assess your reading. Also with the speed reading, now even in our college we have different groups for reading. They meet time to time, or clubs for reading, for example. You can join them. And what is good with that, because for example you choose a novel or a book, okay, with your colleagues or classmates or friends, okay, maybe you and others can read the same book and then you can discuss. Through the discussion, you will check that, if you actually understand the book or not. So those all techniques will help you in speed reading. And also, let's say, based on your work, you are traveling a lot, okay? And you are doing, let's say, public speeches and all that, presentations, So reading is a natural process for you. So for example, now with your iPad, with your phone, there are many applications you can, download in your phone and you can use for reading. Even for example, the PDF. Let's say you have an article in PDF, okay? There is an icon you can click and it is reads for you. This process is good because it will help you in reading. Also, let's say you are viewing some videos in YouTube. So what you can do, just click on the caption, the CC, okay, and try to listen. And at the same time, okay, you are reading the captions, the words and the sentence they are saying with your eyes. Okay, sometimes you can use the pointer, or your pen or whatever, okay? And the same process you are learning. So what I mean is, like, try to use different methods, different technologies to just learn how to read. And as I said, reading, speaking are connected. If you learn how to read, it will be easier for you to speak. And all these processes will help you also in the writing process. So try your best, okay, to read whatever comes in your hand. And also for example, for our kids, okay, there are many applications can teach the kids, the words, how they can, connect the words and have chunks of words, okay. And also we can teach them the regular words, okay, that for example, I am, for example, hi. So when they start reading, the regular words, they will, easily, speed read their processes. And now there are different, like, fun games, even like, with the AI, artificial intelligence and all that, and games. Even with my kids, I use, like, different games applications. You can download them freely to your kids at home, or if you have brothers or sisters, okay, and they can play. Like, for example, Kalimat Kirash, it's in Arabic. So what they do, they try to, like, connect the alphabets and try to, with the picture, the photo, for example, sun, Shams, for example, the word Daw, and they will learn the words, and then, they will go to levels. From those levels, okay, they win and they will get more gifts, okay. So for example, if you have, let's say, 3 kids at home, you give each kid, okay, the application, if they download it in a phone or iPad, and they will play. And the winner, you can give him a gift, for example, or maybe take him to a trip. So those processes, kind of activities, okay, with the kids will help them to learn how to read and to speed their reading in future. And thank you, students, for attending this workshop. And thank you, Ms. Amina, for organizing the workshop. Thank you.
شكرا دكتورة.
العفو.
الله يعطيك العافية إن شاء الله.